In this particular lecture, we discuss how to register a form control in React Hook form. As always, you could find rest of the React Hook form videos and recommended references along with GitHub repository of the demo project in video description and inside the first comment of this video. To start from scratch, I will undo everything what we have done in previous lecture using React Hook form. We now have a React component that only contains plain HTML elements apart from this TypeScript type. It represents the form data having string properties for customer name and mobile. You could see the corresponding input fields. Both of them is wrapped within a form element like this. Now let's see what all things we can do with React Hook form. Before diving into the fundamentals of the package, let me show you how to navigate through the official documentation here at reacthookform.com. The documentation is quite detailed and well structured with real-world examples provided when necessary to illustrate the topic. Within the homepage, you will find various promising features of the library like these. We will be discussing and demonstrating each of them at various stages of constructing the form. And inside this Get Started section, you could see quick guides on using the package with different real-world examples. And here we have the detailed API documentation. Pretty much everything inside the library could be summarized into these 6 hooks. And we'll start our discussion with this primary hook use form. You could see various parameters or options that you can pass to the hook, followed by the detailed explanation on each of the parameters. At the end, you could see a set of methods and objects returned back from the hook. We'll make use of them to construct the form as per our requirement. Throughout the course, we'll be highlighting topics we already covered from this cheat sheet so that you could easily see the progress that you have made and things you have yet to cover from this course. Now, back to the project. Let's start with invoking the primary hook use form. In order to see what all things it returns, I'll wrap the same inside a log statement like this. Back to the browser. Let's open the developer console. Now, if you are confused by seeing this double logging of same variable or object, you could see the official React documentation on the same topic. It's nothing but a precaution when we are running the app in strict mode, and it will only happen in development environment. Your components will re-render an extra time to find bugs caused by impure rendering. You could see the further explanation here. Now, back to the topic. So here is the return object from invoking the primary hook use form. You could see the same inside the documentation here. Now, for the sake of future explanation, I will undock this developer console from this browser. Let's place it side by side with VS Code. From now onwards, we'll use the cheat sheet for briefing APIs, hooks, methods, and properties. So when we call use form hook, it returns an object having these methods here. For now, I will just destructure this register method. So here we go. We'll destructure register from the return object. Now this method is used to register input elements like these into React Hook form. Now let's look what are things it returns when we call the method. As a first parameter, we have to pass the name of the input element. So it returns an object having these properties. First of all, we have the name, exactly what we have passed to the method, and then 2 functions to handle the events on blur and on change. And then a reference generated by the library which is to be applied on the input element. You could see the same inside the cheat sheet here. When we invoke the register method, it returns an object having these properties and methods. Now what we have to do is, we have to assign these properties inside the return object to the corresponding input element. Suppose we are assigning the return object into a variable like this, customer control. Now we could pass the properties from this object to the respective attribute of the input control like this. Name is equal to customer control dot name. Let's copy paste the line for rest of the properties. Now in order to edit these words simultaneously, I will use the shortcut Ctrl D. Reference, on change, and on blur. Now, let's discuss the significance of these properties inside the return object. So first of all, we have name property and it will be having the value whatever we have passed as a first parameter to the register method. And it is assigned to the name attribute of the input control. Now this HTML attribute name is used to uniquely identify input elements in a form. Now this reference property contains the React reference object generated by the library and it is assigned to the React attribute reference here. The assignment of React reference object to the form input fields like this gives an upper hand to the library. More about that will be discussed in next lecture. Now the remaining onChange and onBlur are two functions to handle the respective events onChange and onBlur. Now these functions are defined inside the library to implement its features. For example, the onChange event is responsible for updating the values stored inside the library when we make changes inside this input control here. So these event handlers act as a middleware in between the library and the UI. Now you may ask, if React state object is not saving the form data, then who does? The containing form elements input state is stored in React hook form itself. From now onwards, the library will take care of the control's basic needs, and further features from the library will be implemented to it when we pass the necessary configurations. Since these properties inside the return object is having the same name as that of the input control attributes, we can directly destructure the object from this register method invocation. So this is what we have to do. We'll call this method inside the control and let's directly destructure the return object. The destructured key value pairs of the return object becomes attribute and value of the input element. In order to verify the same, you can inspect this element. See, this name attribute is assigned from the return object property because of this destructuring. Like the rest of the properties will be binded to the corresponding input attributes. Now into this register method, we have only passed the name of the input control. Now apart from this name parameter, we can pass register options as a second parameter. And into it, we can pass these much options. For now, let me pass a default value with this value option here. So here we have the second parameter as an object. Now let's pass the default value into this property. See, the default value is already populated here. So this is how we pass a default value when we invoke the register method. Now let's register the second input control, mobile. For that, I will just copy paste this. Now the name of the control will be mobile. Now like I have shown in previous quick demo, if you pass the type of the form data to this use form hook like this, food delivery form type, you could see the control name suggestion from this given properties. See? Now if you make any typo while providing the name of the control, you will see the TypeScript compiler error. So passing TypeScript type to this use form hook is really helpful. So now we have registered both of these input control to React hook form library. Now instead of passing the default value to each register method invocation like this, there is another way of assigning default values to all input fields all at once. We will come to that in a bit. Now finally, let's also discuss how to submit this form. For that, we can add the onSubmit event like this. We will handle the event inside a function called onSubmit. Now in our previous session, while creating the typical form, we have discussed how we used to implement the form submit event. So I will copy paste the same from this typical form component here. Now don't bother about the type of this event parameter. Now let's get rid of everything except this prevent default and let's comment the line here. Now like we have already discussed, when we submit the form, because of the default behavior of the form will get reloaded and the value from these input fields will be passed as a query string here. Now in order to prevent this default behavior of the form submission, we used to call this method prevent default from the event parameter e. Now let's look how React hook form handle form submission. For that, use form hook returns a method handle submit along with register method. So I will just destructure the same here, handle submit. Now we just need to do this. We'll call this method handle submit from the library, and then the function that we have created could be passed as a callback to this handle submit function like this. Now this method handle submit is already taken care of, preventing the default behavior of the form when we submit the form. So we don't have to do that in all of the form. So let me get rid of this here. Now this pass function will get invoked from this method handle submit. And the value of the input fields inside the form will be passed as a parameter to this method on submit. So we can receive that through the first parameter of the method here, like form data. It will be of the type food delivery form type. Now let's print the same here. Now let's check whether it works or not. Boom, that's it. So that's how easy it is to construct a form with React Hook Form library. In this lecture, we have learned how to register form input fields using the register method returned from the useForm hook. In order to do so, we have assigned the return object properties from the register method to corresponding HTML attributes of the input elements. While invoking the register method, as a first parameter, we have passed the name of the control, and then as a second parameter, we can pass the options object having these properties here. For now, we have only passed the default value of the control through the value option. Finally, we have submitted the form with the help of the method handle submit returned from useForm hook. In next lecture, we'll compare the performance difference between this form created using React Hook form against the typical form that we have created in previous section. Let's see how much progress is there already.